Today's video is on multiplication of complex numbers with variables. The key word here is variables. Since there are variables in each one of these questions, we cannot use IPART to get a final answer. We may be able to use our calculator to actually do pieces of the problem, but again, we cannot put the whole problem into the calculator and get an answer because of the variables. Another thing we want to remember is that, and write yourself a little note here, that I squared equals a -1, because that may come in handy to help simplify our answers. All right, let's take a look at the first problem here. It's a binomial times a binomial. It's dots, so we know the two terms in the middle should cancel out. Let's see what we get when we do double distributive property. We're going to get x squared minus ix plus ix minus I squared. Okay, negative ix and a positive ix cancel out, so I have x squared minus I squared is a -1. So a minus of a minus becomes a positive, so my answer is x squared plus 1. That one wasn't too bad. Let's take a look at number 2. Number 2 is a binomial times a binomial. And the reason I know it's a binomial because it is separated by an addition, two subtraction signs, but in the binomial there's also another binomial. So we're just going to take our time and do double distributive property and then see what else we can do. All right, so we'll end up with x squared minus x times 2 minus I minus x times 2 plus I. So I'm just doing double distributive property. Then a negative times a negative is a positive, and I will have 2 plus I times 2 minus I. Okay, I can get rid of the parentheses on the left by doing distributive property, so I have x squared minus 2x plus ix minus 2x minus ix plus, well, these two binomials I actually could put into IPART because there is no variable with them. So why don't you pause the video, put that into IPART, and see what you end up with. Hopefully, once you put it into IPART, you ended up with 4, and it should have come out to be a minus I squared, which comes out to be a positive 5. So that worked out very nicely to be 5 in the calculator. All right, let's see what I can do by combining like terms. Well, the positive ix and the negative ix will cancel out, so I'll end up with x squared minus 4x plus 5. There's nothing more I can do with that, so there's my answer. Again, I couldn't put the whole thing in the calculator, but I was able to put a part of it in the calculator to help me get part of the answer so that it would be a little bit easier for myself. All right, let's take a look at number 3 together. Number 3 looks like it's very hard because the first one's not a binomial, it's a trinomial. The second one looks like it's a binomial, but I think I can distribute that negative. Let's see what I'll get if I take care of that guy, because there's no way I can do double distributive property because the first one's not a binomial. So I bring down the first one, x minus a plus bi, times x, and I'm going to distribute through the -1, minus a minus bi. Well, now I have a trinomial times a trinomial, so I'm just going to take my time. Everybody in the first trinomial needs to be multiplied by everybody in the second trinomial. So here I go. I'm going to end up with x squared minus ax minus bix. Okay, that took care of multiplying through the x. Now I got to multiply through by the negative a. So negative ax plus a squared plus BIA, or I'll do ABI, only because it's alphabetical order. All right, so now we have leftovers to multiply the positive BI. So I have plus BIX minus ABI minus B squared I squared. Okay, so let's see what I can do to neaten this up. Let's see here. I have a negative BIX and a positive BIX. Those guys will cancel out. I have a positive ABI and a negative ABI. Those guys will cancel out. All right, so let's see what I have. I have x squared, a minus ax, and a minus ax will give me a negative 2ax plus a squared minus b squared, but I squared is a negative 1. So now I have x squared minus 2ax plus a squared plus b squared. There's nobody else I can put together, so there's my answer. That one was quite hard because basically it was a trinomial times a trinomial. All right, one more question for today. Number 4 says, x plus 1 squared times x minus 1 squared. Well, before I can multiply, I definitely have to square the left and the right side. So I'm going to write it as, let me move this up a little bit, x plus I times x plus I times x minus I times x minus I. All right. I'm going to do double distributive property on the left, and I'm going to get x squared plus ix plus ix plus I squared times x squared minus ix minus ix plus I squared, because a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, let's neaten up the left side. X squared plus 2ix. Let's see, I squared is a negative 1, so now this is minus 1 times x squared minus 2xi. I squared is a negative 1, so it becomes a minus 1. All right, I'm going to multiply now a trinomial times a trinomial. Here we go. X to the 4th minus 2x cubed I. Remember, you add exponents when you multiply. Minus x squared. Then I'm going to get multiplied through by the 2ix. So I'm going to get plus 2ix cubed minus 4i squared x squared minus 2ix. Okay, so we have left over to multiply through by the negative 1. Minus x squared plus 2ix. I'm just rearranging, writing this as ix instead of xi, plus 1. All right, I multiplied everybody through. Now it's time to combine like terms. Let's see here. Oh, this x cubed I, even though it's written in a different order, remember multiplication is commutative, these guys will cancel out. Let's see, who else will cancel out? These guys will cancel out. Is there anybody else that will cancel out that I can look at closely here? No, let's see what I have. I bring down the x to the 4th. X squared and a negative x squared gives me a negative 2x squared. Okay. Negative 4i squared x squared. I squared is a negative 1 times 4 is a positive 4, so that's a plus 4x squared plus 1. I can put the x squares together, so now I end up with x to the 4th plus 2x squared plus 1. And that's my final answer. That one was quite lengthy and a little hard, so you might want to go back and look it over one more time, or maybe try it again on a piece of scrap paper until you think you got the hang of it. If you have any questions, please bring them to class tomorrow.